Ever give any thought to the possibility that being nice may not always be the most effective strategy? Is it possible that the same characteristic that we appreciate, which is our natural tendency to assist, encourage, and support other people, might occasionally work against us? It is an idea that is uncomfortable, yet Niccolò Machiavelli investigated it with a clarity that is piercing beyond comprehension. According to him, the ways in which we have traditionally understood the concept of kindness may be a crucial factor in the way that power escapes into the hands of others. One of the most profound truths that Machiavelli reveals in The Prince is that politics is not about morality. Rather, it is about efficacy. Kindness that is unadulterated and steadfast may become a liability rather than a strength when it comes to the quest of power. In the course of history, there are several instances of well-meaning leaders who, by placing a higher value on morality than on strategy, ended up being outwitted, dismissed from power, or even completely removed from their positions of authority. When it comes to leadership, the dangers of being kind. Why is it so risky to be compassionate while in a leadership position? Due to the fact that it may be misconstrued as a sign of weakness. One does not necessarily have to be strong in order to be decent. In fact, an excessive devotion to compassion makes a leader an easy target for others who do not have any such restraints. As we have been taught, morality does not always correlate with survival. And in many instances, the expectations of virtue that society places on people are geared to retain control rather than to empower individuals and their choices. Machiavelli contends that compassion ought to be seen as a tool rather than a goal. When the circumstances call for it, a monarch must be prepared to take decisive action, even if it means acting harshly. This does not imply that one should be harsh without a reason, but it does require acknowledging that goodness on its own is not sufficient to guarantee power. Throughout the course of history, the most effective leaders have not been completely good or wicked. Rather, they have been adaptive, understanding when to use compassion and when to embrace guile or force. It is generally more beneficial for a ruler to be feared than adored, according to Machiavelli, which is one of the most contentious theories that he introduced. Despite the fact that this does not legitimize random acts of cruelty, it does accept a basic reality. If a leader relies too much on compassion, they run the danger of losing respect. It is possible for a monarch to fall from power if they allow their benevolence to obscure their perception of the hard realities of administration. Case studies from the past to examine the equilibrium of power. In the course of history, there is much evidence of leaders who try to strike a balance between being nice and exercising power. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king of Rome, was renowned for his knowledge and generosity. He was also recognized for his kind nature. During his reign, there was an increase in instability, internal warfare, and invasions, despite the fact that his rule was ideal in principle. Even though he was benevolent, Rome continued to sink into chaos during his reign. Commodus, who succeeded him, was a ruthless and irresponsible person. Compare this to his predecessor. As for him, he was unsuccessful as well, but for the opposite reason. He was incapable of strategically using power. An even more successful example may be found in Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, who struck a precise balance between displaying kindness and making smart political maneuvers. When it was necessary, he neutralized dangers, but he also worked to win popular favor, which allowed him to secure stability for decades. Here is still another illustration. Abraham Lincoln, who is often admired for his moral leadership. But Lincoln was more than just a good person. He was also quite astute. It was at this period that he suspended habeas corpus, engaged in political maneuvering that was smart, and made difficult choices during the war that favored unity above idealism. His legacy will live on not just because he was nice, but also because he has the ability to be tough when necessary. This is not a constraint. Rather, morality is a strategy. Machiavelli's philosophy does not deny the existence of morality. Rather, it examines the ways in which morality may become a restraint. Generosity should not be seen as a blind responsibility, but rather as a weapon that may be used strategically to achieve broader aims. The idea that morality must always be absolute is called into question by his point of view, which compels us to re-evaluate our connection with morality. Taking into consideration the most prominent leaders in history, how many of them adhered to the conventional moral standards? Very few, if any at all. Even if some of them governed with brutality and others with pragmatism, they were all successful because they were able to grasp the impression of compassion and exploit it to cement their authority. Flexibility is a must for genuine leadership. That politics acts outside of normal moral rules is something that Machiavelli brings to our attention. Quite sometimes, difficult choices have to be taken in situations when compassion alone is not enough. Kindness, however, is not the end objective, but rather a resource that a leader may use in their armory. A monarch is required to have the ability to recognize when compassion should be tempered with ruthlessness and when moral purity should be replaced with calculated strategy. This insight from Machiavelli is not a plea to renounce morality. Rather, it is a warning. In the brutal arena of power, the ability to manage morality is more useful than blindly adhering to it. The importance of Machiavellian reflection in the modern world. In the sphere of politics, this idea is not restricted to a single domain. Having the ability to distinguish between being compassionate and being firm is essential to sustaining influence in a variety of contexts, including business, leadership, and even interpersonal relationships. The chief executive officers of significant organizations often confront comparable conundrums. Should they emphasize the well-being of their employees at the expense of earnings, or should they make difficult choices that ensure the company's continued success over the long term? Steve Jobs, for instance, was well known for his demanding leadership style. He never let up on his expectations. The strategic strategy that Steve took secured Apple's domination, despite the fact that he was not renowned for his friendliness. As a result of their leadership strategies, people such as Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have garnered both praise and criticism from the respective communities. They are aware that in order to achieve greatness, it is sometimes necessary to make decisions that are often controversial. Machiavelli believed that in certain cases, power and morality did not coincide. His argument is not about whether the behaviors of a leader are generally seen to be good or bad. Rather, it is about whether or not they have the potential to provide stability, prosperity, and domination. Being successful in politics requires you to be determined, effective, and most importantly, to survive. The way he sees it, kindness is not something that is thrown away. Rather, it is only a means to an aim that is used with wisdom and precision. The most important question, what way should we think about being kind? The most important takeaway from Machiavelli's writings is that genuine power does not originate from moral purity, but rather from the individual's willingness to make decisions that are challenging and sometimes unpopular. If practicality is not there to moderate kindness, then kindness becomes unimportant. It is for this reason that his views continue to be so radical. He does not argue for a greater morality, but rather for a strategy that is not constrained by conventional ethical expectations. Therefore, to what extent are we prepared to accept compassion not as a dogma, but rather as a tool? We are obligated to acknowledge the boundaries of morality if we want to achieve our objectives of stability, survival, and prosperity. Having the ability to recognize when to be compassionate and when to be merciless is the key to true power. This is a lesson that is more important than it has ever been in a world where difficult decisions are unavoidable. In the end, Machiavelli's perspective on power forces us to re-evaluate the role that morality plays in the administration of government. Does a great leader always behave in a compassionate manner? Or does he or she have the ability to recognize when morality should be used to forward the goals of the organization? It is possible that the issue that has to be asked is whether or not we, as a society, are ready to manage power with the same level of maturity and willingness to make tough decisions for the sake of the greater good. It is possible that we will discover a greater power if we give up the strict concept of compassion as an absolute law. This strength is not dependent on blind commitment to morality, but rather on the intelligence to successfully wield it. Do you have any thoughts? When it comes to leadership, does morality provide a challenge? Or does it play a role in the process of making tough decisions?